Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. It is fantastic to have you with us for another deep dive. Whenever we sit down to talk about what makes a business successful, we almost always focus on the external stuff. We obsess over product market fit, we analyze marketing campaigns, we look at AI strategies, we're always looking outward. But we rarely stop to obsess over the shape of the company itself.
So overlooked, isn't it? We tend to treat organizational structure as this, I don't know, boring administrative thing.
Yeah.
It's like a PDF chart HR sends you when you join, and then you never look at it again.
Exactly. It feels like paperwork, not strategy, something you just set and forget.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're diving into a really insightful article by Felix Römer from smartkeys.org. And he argues that your org chart isn't just paperwork. It's the operating system of your entire business. And in today's world of, extreme speed and remote teams, how we organize humans is actually a strategic weapon.
It really is. And Rimmer frames this not as some dry HR theory, but as this fundamental tension every leader feels. It's the tension between speed and control. It's the battle between the pyramid and the pancake.
The pyramid and the pancake, I love that. It's so visual. So on one side, you've got the classic hierarchy, the pyramid, and on the other, the flat model, the pancake.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to unpack these two, look at real-world examples like Amazon and Valve, and figure out why org chart software is suddenly a big deal.
And crucially, we're going to talk about the hybrid solution, the strategic cheat code, if you will, that might be the answer for most companies.
Okay, let's get into the architecture of work. Let's start with the pyramid. This is the model most of us are probably familiar with. CEO at the top, then layers of middle management cascading down.
Right, the traditional chain of command. And before we dismiss it as old school, we have to understand why it exists. The source material makes a really important point here. The hierarchical model is built for one thing, and that is predictability.
Predictability. That makes sense. I mean, if you're running a massive ship, you need to know who's steering. You can't have people debating which way is north in the middle of a storm.
Exactly. And the article points to Amazon as the prime example. Now, Amazon is interesting because they're super innovative, but structurally, they're very hierarchical. When you're operating at that scale, with hundreds of thousands of employees, you just can't wing it. You need control that flows all the way from the top down to make sure that package gets to your door in 2 days.
So the pro is clear accountability. You know who your boss is, you know who signs off on the budget, and you know what the path to promotion looks like. The ladder is right there. It feels safe.
And specialization. That's another big plus from the text. Because expectations are so explicit, you can hire someone for a very specific job and they can get really good at it. Onboarding is faster because the box they fit into is clearly defined.
And there's always a but with these models. We all know the downside. It's the silo effect, right?
Yes, the dreaded silo.
So break that down. Why is that such a killer?
Well, in a strict hierarchy, information flows up and down, vertically, but it doesn't move horizontally very well. If marketing wants to talk to engineering, they have to send a request up to a manager, who talks to a director, who talks to a VP, who then walks across the hall to the other VP, and then it cascades all the way back down.
It's a corporate game of telephone.
It is, and by the time the message gets there, it's distorted, or worse, it's just too late. Bureaucracy kills innovation. And the source mentions management costs, too. You're paying a lot of salaries for people whose main job is just to manage other people.
Right. You're paying for coordination, not creation.
Precisely. Which brings us to the alternative, the pancake.
The flat model.
The flat model. Okay, this is the one that gets all the hype in the startup world. The article calls it the bossless model. Authority moves to the team. It sounds very egalitarian. It is. And the example used here is Valve, the gaming company. They're famous for this. They have this handbook that talks about how desks have wheels. The idea is, if you find a project interesting, you literally roll your desk over to that group and just start working.
That's wild. So people aren't assigned tasks by a manager?
Nope. They pick projects based on where they think they can have the most customer impact. It relies on very high agency, self-motivated people.
That sounds like a dream for some and a total nightmare for others. But the upside is obvious, I guess. Speed.
Lightning fast decision-making. That's the biggest pro. If you don't have to ask a manager who has to ask a director, you just do the work. The text notes this model lowers overhead a lot because you aren't paying for all those middle managers.
And communication is theoretically better. It's real time. But here's where it gets really interesting. The article warns about the hidden costs of going flat. I think there's this misconception that flat means easy.
No, absolutely not. Flat can be much harder. The source highlights a major risk: role ambiguity. In a flat structure, sometimes nobody knows who makes the final call.
Yeah.
You get into these endless consensus loops where everyone is talking, but no decision gets made.
It's the tyranny of structurelessness.
That's the term.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to burnout. The article mentions work-life strain because employees have to wear too many hats. If there's no manager to shield you or prioritize your work, you just end up doing everything.
So you're doing the work, plus the management of the work, plus the coordination of the work.
Exactly. And this creates a huge problem with direction as the company scales. And that's the perfect segue to the next big idea from the source, the scale breaker.
Right, because a flat structure is great when you're 5 people in a garage. But what happens when you hire employee number 50 or 500?
This is where reality hits. The text suggests this great mental simulation for anyone listening. It asks you to imagine adding 20 people to your team tomorrow. Just poof, 20 new hires. Does your current onboarding process break?
That's a terrifying thought for a lot of founders.
And if the answer is yes, you probably need layers, because coordination becomes exponentially harder with every new person. It's just math.
It's Dunbar's number, right? That limit on how many relationships we can manage.
Exactly. If everyone reports to the CEO and the CEO has 60 direct reports, that CEO isn't coaching anyone. They're just drowning in one-on-ones. They become the bottleneck, which defeats the whole purpose of being flat in the first place.
So we have this tension. Startups want to be flat for speed, but growth pushes them towards hierarchy for control. It feels like a trap. But the article brings up something that's often overlooked: technology.
Yes, modern org chart software.
And I know that sounds like the most boring phrase in the English language, like something you'd buy in 1995. But stick with us. The source makes the case that this isn't just about drawing boxes anymore. It's about visibility.
Think about it. We're all in remote or hybrid setups now. You can't just look across the office and see who's talking to whom. The article argues that you need these dynamic maps that show who approves what and how work actually flows.
It's about reducing confusion. In a remote world, if you don't have a visual map of responsibilities, you are flying blind. The software isn't just for HR, it's a tool for employees to figure out, okay, who actually has the authority to say yes to this idea?
Exactly. Visibility creates speed. If I know exactly who to go to, I don't waste 3 days in the wrong email thread. These modern tools also let you map skills, not just job titles. So you can find the person who knows Mandarin or is an expert in a specific code base. It makes the hidden network visible.
So it stops being a static PDF and starts being a user interface for the company.
That's a great way to put it, a UI for your organization.
So we have the pyramid, the pancake, and the tech to map them. But here's the insider insight from the source that I found most valuable. We think of this as a binary choice. You're either a cool, flat startup or a stuffy corporate hierarchy. But Römer says that's a false dichotomy.
It is. The hybrid solution is the strategic cheat code.
Tell us about the hybrid mix. How does that work in practice?
So, the source suggests that smart companies blend the formats based on function. You maintain a hierarchical structure for the parts of the business that need compliance and predictability. Think finance, operations, legal.
That makes total sense. You do not want a move fast and break things approach to your tax filings.
Please no. You want a very strict hierarchy for your tax filings. But for the other side of the house, R&D, product development, creative teams, you use flat cross-functional squads.
So you have pockets of flatness inside a broader structure.
Precisely. You create these protected environments, almost like internal startups, where innovation can happen fast without all the red tape. But you keep the sturdy walls of the hierarchy around the business functions that keep the lights on.
It balances accountability with speed. That seems to be the holy grail here.
And it really is the only way to survive. If you go 100% hierarchy, you're too slow. If you go 100% flat at scale, you implode from chaos. You need the stability to support the agility.
So why should someone listening right now care about this? Maybe they're not a CEO.
Well, the market moves too fast for slow decisions. That's the pro-flat argument. But employees burn out without clarity. That's the pro-hierarchy argument. So as a team member, you're constantly living in that tension. If you feel burned out, it might be because your structure is too flat, you lack clarity. If you feel frustrated and blocked, it's likely too hierarchical.
You can diagnose your own pain points by looking at the org shape. That's powerful. And there's a specific point for remote teams in the article that I found a bit counterintuitive.
Oh, the remote paradox.
Yeah. You'd think remote work means more freedom, looser structures, but the source argues the opposite.
It does. It says remote teams actually need more explicit processes and written decision rights. In an office, you can rely on osmosis.
The water cooler talk?
Exactly. You hear things, you can tap someone on the shoulder, you pick up on the structure socially.
But on Slack, you can't just figure it out over coffee.
No. If it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. So regardless of your structure, the documentation of who does what needs to be incredibly robust in a remote setting.
That is a huge takeaway. Structure isn't the enemy of remote work, it's the enabler. You need clear boundaries to be autonomous within.
Perfectly put. And this shifts the role of leadership, too. The text notes that in these modern hybrid models, the CEO's role changes dramatically.
How so?
They shift from being a micromanager, approving every $50 expense, to being a coach.
Yeah.
Their job is to remove obstacles.
I like that. The leader isn't on top of the pyramid shouting orders. They're on the sidelines clearing the path so the players can run.
Exactly. They're gardening, not manufacturing.
So looking forward, what's the actionable strategy here? The author concludes that structure isn't a permanent tattoo, right?
No, it's a living organism.
Yeah.
And I think this is the most practical piece of advice in the whole article. Implement quarterly reviews of your org structure.
We review revenue quarterly, roadmaps quarterly, but you're right, we rarely review how we are working. We just assume the org chart is a fixed monument.
We should challenge that. The source advises us to pressure test workflows. And the test is simple. If a routine decision takes 2 weeks to get approved, your structure is wrong.
If a decision takes 2 weeks, your structure is wrong. That is a bold metric.
It is, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
You have to look at your span of control. Does one manager have 20 reports? They're a bottleneck. You need to adjust the levels and spans.
So it's about staying flexible. You might need to be flatter this quarter to launch a product and then add some structure next quarter to stabilize it.
Precisely. The structure serves the strategy, not the other way around.
You know, this brings up a final thought for me. We've been talking about boxes and lines, but the source touches on something deeper at the end. It says innovation depends on psychological safety.
Yes. And this is the variable that can override any structure.
Right. Because you can have the perfect flat structure, but if people are terrified to make a mistake, they won't innovate. They'll just freeze.
That's the critical variable. Culture fills the gaps. The org chart leaves open. If you have a flat structure but a culture of fear, you just have a terrified mob. If you have a hierarchy with a culture of trust, you can actually move surprisingly fast.
So the org chart is the skeleton, but culture is the muscle.
That's a great way to put it. You need both to be healthy.
Well, whether you choose the pyramid or the pancake or a hybrid of both, the goal really seems to be transparency. Let people know the rules of the game so they can actually play.
Absolutely. Transparency is the ultimate efficiency hack. When people know how decisions get made, they stop playing politics and start doing work.
I want to thank you all for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast today. This has been a fascinating look under the hood of how we actually get work done.
It really has. It's a good reminder that we can design our companies just as intentionally as we design our products. We shouldn't just accept the default settings.
If you want to dive deeper into this, and I highly recommend you do, check out Felix Römer's full article, Flat versus Hierarchical, on smartkeys.org. He has these great side-by-side comparison tables we talked about.
Yes, the visual maps really help. It's definitely worth a look.
We've put the link right there in the show notes for you. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please make sure to subscribe to the SmartKeys podcast. We'll be covering a lot more on the future of work.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Catch you next time.